In a shocking development that has sent ripples across global media, something unprecedented has just unfolded in Russia, leaving President Vladimir Putin seemingly powerless. Sources indicate that this major event could have serious implications, not only for Russia internally, but also for the ongoing war with Ukraine. The situation has escalated rapidly, and analysts are calling it one of the most significant disruptions in recent Russian history. A seismic event has just rattled the core of Russia's political landscape, an occurrence so unprecedented that even seasoned analysts are struggling to fully grasp its implications. For years, President Vladimir Putin has projected an image of unshakable authority, a leader whose control over the Kremlin and the broader machinery of the state seemed absolute. Yet, this sudden disruption is challenging that perception in a dramatic and highly visible way. Early reports indicate that what has unfolded is not just a minor hiccup in governance or an isolated protest. Rather, it appears to be a multi-layered crisis touching economic, military, and political spheres simultaneously. The sheer scale and speed of the event have left Russia's traditional power structures scrambling to respond. Observers point out that this disruption is significant precisely because it exposes vulnerabilities that were previously obscured by centralized control and tightly managed state media narratives. There are signs that regional authorities are questioning directives from Moscow, while certain military factions are showing hesitation in executing commands, raising serious questions about cohesion within the armed forces. Meanwhile, economic pressures, including sanctions, supply chain disruptions, and internal market volatility, are adding fuel to the fire, magnifying public frustration and eroding confidence in long-standing institutions. Analysts warn that the combination of these factors creates a perfect storm, one that could fundamentally alter the balance of power in Russia if not contained swiftly. Social media platforms and international observers are seizing on every detail, turning the event into a global talking point almost instantly. Experts note that the optics of a government appearing unprepared or incapable of managing a crisis can be far more damaging than the crisis itself, particularly for a nation like Russia, where perception of strength has long been a central pillar of domestic and foreign policy. The rapid dissemination of information, much of it unverified but emotionally charged, is intensifying scrutiny and amplifying speculation about potential fractures within the Kremlin. What makes this development even more remarkable is the speed with which it has emerged. In a matter of hours, what may have started as a contained issue has grown into a situation with nationwide implications. Analysts emphasize that the coming days are critical, as the government's next moves will not only determine how the crisis unfolds internally, but could also signal Russia's strategic posture to the outside world, including its approach to the ongoing war with Ukraine. In the wake of the unfolding crisis, one of the most striking elements is the apparent erosion of President Vladimir Putin's control over key levers of power. For decades, Putin has been seen as a figure whose authority was almost absolute, a leader capable of suppressing dissent and directing the course of the nation with precision. Yet, the current situation has revealed cracks that few could have anticipated, showing a leader who is, for the first time in recent memory, struggling to maintain a grip on the state apparatus. Reports suggest that decision-making within the Kremlin has become fragmented, with conflicting signals emerging from different branches of government and even within the security services. This fragmentation is particularly significant because it signals a departure from the tightly coordinated command structure that has defined Putin's rule for years. Political analysts are observing that this erosion of authority is not happening in isolation. It is closely linked to growing internal dissatisfaction among the populace, economic pressures exacerbated by sanctions, and a sense of frustration among military and administrative elites. Some officials are reportedly questioning long-standing directives and exploring alternative approaches, a development that would have been unthinkable under normal circumstances. The uncertainty generated by these internal debates has made it increasingly difficult for the Kremlin to project the image of unyielding control that has been central to its domestic and international strategy. Social media and independent observers have seized on every sign of weakness, amplifying public perception that the president may be losing his iron grip. Footage of protests, unusual public statements by regional officials, and rumors of disagreements within the military have fueled speculation and heightened scrutiny of Putin's leadership. Experts warn that the optics of apparent indecision or internal discord can have an outsized impact, potentially emboldening opposition voices and undermining confidence among loyalists who have long relied on the perception of unified command. The stakes are heightened further by the ongoing war in Ukraine, which requires consistent and coordinated leadership. Analysts suggest that any sign of wavering control could have direct consequences on military strategy, resource allocation, and diplomatic maneuvering. In an environment where every move is scrutinized both domestically and internationally, even minor lapses in authority can create ripple effects that resonate far beyond Russia's borders, reshaping perceptions of the Kremlin's stability and influence on the global stage. The internal instability in Russia has reached levels that many analysts describe as unprecedented, signaling a convergence of political, economic, and social pressures that threaten to destabilize the very foundations of the state. While Russia has faced challenges before, the current wave of unrest is different, marked not by isolated incidents, but by a multi-faceted crisis that is testing the cohesion of the country's leadership. There are growing reports of dissent among regional governors who are openly questioning directives from Moscow, signaling cracks in the centralized authority that has long been a hallmark of Putin's administration. At the same time, elements within the military are reportedly expressing hesitation in executing orders, raising alarm among defense analysts about potential fractures in command and control structures. Economic pressures are amplifying the political instability as sanctions, inflation, and disruptions to trade create a climate of uncertainty for ordinary citizens and business leaders alike. Market volatility, shortages of essential goods, and public frustration are feeding into a broader narrative of discontent, with social media platforms exploding with commentary, speculation, and in some cases, calls for change. Observers note that this combination of economic stress and political dissent creates a feedback loop where uncertainty encourages further instability, which in turn exacerbates economic challenges, making it increasingly difficult for the government to project control. The human dimension of this unrest cannot be ignored. Citizens are not merely passive observers. Widespread dissatisfaction is manifesting in public demonstrations, unusual expressions of dissent, and a general erosion of confidence in traditional institutions. Analysts highlight that when social trust declines in tandem with political and economic pressures, the state's ability to enforce policy diminishes, and even loyalist factions may begin to question long-standing strategies. This creates an environment where misinformation and rumor can spread rapidly, further intensifying uncertainty and placing additional strain on the Kremlin's communication and enforcement apparatus. Internationally, the instability is being closely monitored, with foreign governments and analysts viewing these developments as potential indicators of Russia's future trajectory. The global perception of a fragmented, internally conflicted Russia could have significant implications for ongoing negotiations, military operations, and geopolitical strategy, particularly in the context of the war in Ukraine. Analysts emphasize that the current turbulence is more than a temporary disruption. It is a test of the resilience of Russia's political and social structures, with the potential to redefine both domestic governance and the country's role on the world stage. The unfolding internal chaos in Russia has direct and potentially profound implications for the ongoing war in Ukraine, creating a scenario that could shift the strategic balance on the battlefield. For months, analysts have closely monitored Russia's military operations, noting both strengths and vulnerabilities, but the current turbulence within the Kremlin and broader state apparatus introduces a new level of unpredictability. Reports suggest that the usual lines of command may be compromised, with hesitation and dissent emerging among certain military units and regional commanders. This lack of cohesion could translate into slower decision-making, disrupted supply lines, and diminished operational efficiency, all of which Ukraine is likely observing with keen interest. Political experts highlight that wars are often won or lost not just on the battlefield, but within the corridors of power. When leadership is distracted or weakened by internal instability, strategic planning and execution inevitably suffer. In Russia's case, the current disruptions, ranging from public dissatisfaction to regional disagreements, may limit the government's ability to coordinate troop movements, allocate resources effectively, or respond quickly to tactical developments. Analysts caution that even minor lapses caused by internal discord can have outsized effects in a conflict as intense and dynamic as the Ukraine war. At the same time, Ukraine is reportedly monitoring these developments closely, potentially adjusting its strategy in real time. The perception of a distracted or fragmented opponent can embolden military planners to take calculated risks, exploit weaknesses, and apply pressure where resistance may be less coordinated. Social media and intelligence reports are fueling speculation that Ukraine may leverage Russia's internal turmoil to achieve operational gains, while Western allies continue to assess how these changes might affect broader geopolitical dynamics. The ripple effects extend beyond the immediate battlefield. Internal instability in Russia may also influence diplomatic calculations, arms negotiations, and international perceptions of the Kremlin's reliability. Countries observing the conflict are now factoring in the possibility that internal Russian disruptions could weaken its negotiating position or create openings for diplomatic leverage. The combination of military uncertainty and political instability adds a complex layer to an already tense international environment, making the trajectory of the war increasingly difficult to predict. The stakes are further magnified by the speed at which these developments are occurring. Analysts emphasize that the window for Ukraine and its allies to respond strategically is narrow, and any miscalculation could significantly alter the conflict's course. The intersection of internal Russian instability and external military engagement underscores the delicate balance of power and the high-stakes nature of leadership, coordination and timing in modern warfare. The global and social media reaction to Russia's unfolding crisis has been swift, intense, and unrelenting, shining an unflinching spotlight on the vulnerabilities of the Kremlin. Within hours of the initial reports, platforms across the world were flooded with commentary, speculation, and analysis as observers sought to dissect what this disruption means for both Russia and the broader international landscape. Political commentators and experts are emphasizing that the optics of a government appearing unprepared or divided can have far-reaching consequences, potentially undermining not only domestic confidence, but also international credibility. Every misstep, delay, or contradictory statement from Moscow is amplified online, fueling narratives of instability and eroding the carefully cultivated image of centralized control that the Kremlin has relied upon for decades. Social media users have become key players in this unfolding story, sharing images, videos, and eyewitness accounts that highlight fractures within the state. Reports of protests, unusual administrative decisions, and even hints of disagreement within the military command have gone viral, prompting intense discussions and raising questions about the cohesion of Russia's leadership. Analysts warn that this kind of real-time dissemination of information, verified or not, can exacerbate the perception of chaos, creating a feedback loop that pressures political leaders to act quickly, sometimes without full deliberation. This environment increases the likelihood of missteps, miscommunication, and overreactions, further compounding internal instability. International observers are equally focused on the implications of these reactions. Governments, think tanks, and intelligence agencies are monitoring social media trends, regional developments, and news reports to assess the potential impact on Russia's strategic decisions, both domestically and abroad. The perception of a distracted or weakened leadership could influence diplomatic negotiations, military calculations, and geopolitical alignments, especially in the context of ongoing tensions surrounding Ukraine. Analysts suggest that foreign actors are carefully weighing whether these signals of vulnerability represent temporary turbulence or a deeper, systemic shift in Russian governance. The sheer speed and reach of this global attention add unprecedented pressure on the Kremlin, forcing it to navigate both the internal crisis and external scrutiny simultaneously. Every public statement, policy adjustment, or military maneuver is now subject to intense analysis and interpretation, magnifying the stakes of each decision. Experts note that in the digital age, perception can be as critical as reality, and in Russia's case, the court of global opinion may now play a decisive role in shaping the trajectory of the crisis and influencing the Kremlin's next moves. The coming days in Russia are shaping up to be among the most critical in recent history, with experts warning that the nation's trajectory could hinge on decisions made in the immediate future. Political analysts are closely monitoring how the Kremlin will respond to the ongoing crisis, noting that rapid and decisive action, or a lack thereof, could have profound implications for both domestic stability and international relations. The stakes are magnified by the convergence of political unrest, economic pressure, and military challenges, creating a high-risk environment where even small miscalculations could escalate into far-reaching consequences. Observers are pointing out that the speed and coherence of government responses will be a key determinant in whether Russia can regain control or if the disruption signals a deeper structural weakening. Reports indicate that regional authorities, military officials, and public institutions are all operating under heightened uncertainty, complicating efforts to maintain a unified strategy. Analysts emphasize that the perception of indecision at the top can embolden dissenting factions, potentially accelerating internal fragmentation and undermining the Kremlin's authority. The international community is also watching intently, with foreign governments, intelligence agencies, and global media outlets assessing what Russia's next moves might reveal about the stability of its leadership. Any missteps could not only affect internal governance, but also reshape the country's approach to ongoing conflicts, particularly the war in Ukraine. Strategists suggest that the current turbulence may present opportunities for opponents while simultaneously forcing Russia to recalibrate its diplomatic and military priorities. At the same time, social and traditional media are amplifying the narrative of urgency, broadcasting images, reports, and analysis that underscore the potential magnitude of the crisis. Experts note that in today's hyper-connected world, the speed at which information spreads can influence public perception, trigger market reactions, and pressure leaders to act more quickly than they might otherwise prefer. This creates a delicate balancing act where every decision is scrutinized, every statement dissected, and every delay potentially costly. Analysts emphasize that these critical days are not just about managing an immediate disruption, but also about signaling resilience, authority, and strategic foresight. The choices made now could determine whether Russia stabilizes internally, maintains its military and political effectiveness, and projects strength internationally, or whether the current turmoil marks the beginning of a more prolonged period of uncertainty, internal conflict, and global scrutiny. The pressure on the Kremlin is unprecedented, and all eyes are on how it navigates these high-stakes moments that could redefine the country's future on multiple fronts. As the world watches, the big question remains, how will Putin respond, and what will this mean for the ongoing conflict in Ukraine? Experts suggest that the coming days will be crucial in determining whether Russia can regain control or if this event signals a deeper unraveling. One thing is certain, this is a story that demands attention as it could redefine the geopolitical landscape in Eastern Europe.